Welcome to the inner world of filmmaking. I'm your host, Tammy McGarrow. I'm an editor, podcaster, and still photographer. In this show, I will interview filmmakers in all facets of production and distribution. Today, we're going to explore the life of the personal assistant with Nicole Guest. Welcome.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for having me.
All the way from New York.
Yes, all the way.
So I was when I met you a month ago, I was so curious with what is the life of a personal assistant? And I read your bio and you came from the teaching world into personal assistant. So can you walk me through going from teaching to that?
I can. It's a very interesting story. I actually was never one of those people that grew up saying, oh, I know what I want to be when I get older. I always looked up to people that knew exactly what they wanted, and I just never did. I came from a family of teachers, and so it was only natural to go to school to be a teacher, right? So that's what I did. I was a good little girl, and I followed my parents' footsteps. And however, as we all know, unfortunately, teachers do not make a lot of money. So I was teaching during the day, and I ended up supplementing my income by bartending at nighttime in a very well-known, which is now closed down, lesbian bar in Manhattan. And I was actually making more money bartending, if you could believe it, than I was teaching, right? So, but on one of my ships, one of my customers came in, and she had been part of the New York and Los Angeles celebrity assistant group. And just to give you a little background on that, it's just a group of people that have to be sponsored into the organization by whichever celebrity that they're working for. So basically, I think you need to be working for a celebrity for 2 consecutive years. And then sponsored, and it's a board of people that could share and network, the community of wealth and contacts, and my person needs a hairdresser right away in Los Angeles, just things like that, where we're sharing a wealth of information for people that are in our same network. So cut to, I met this woman and she said, oh, so what do you do? And I said, I'm a teacher. And she said, you're too outgoing to be a teacher. Why are you a teacher? And I said, that's such a good question. I said, and I told her, what I said to you. And she said, I have a job that you might be interested in. It was sort of near the end of the year, and I really wasn't sure if I wanted to go back the following year. So she told me that there was a job opening up for an actress, Polly Draper, who was on 30-something, and she's also done a lot of Broadway, and her husband is a famous jazz musician, and her children at the time were getting their own Nickelodeon show called The Naked Brothers Band. And she said, I think you would be amazing as her assistant. I said, assistant? I don't even know what an assistant does. And she said, you know what? You don't have to know. It's either you gel with the person or you don't. I want you to just go meet her and let's see what happens. So, I'm pretty daring. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went and I met her, and it turned into a 2-hour conversation of just talking about our lives, and we really just hit it off. And she said, you know what? I know you don't have any experience, but let's try this out. And I said, okay. So I ended up working for her, which was amazing. And I got into the celebrity assistant group. Yeah, so that's sort of how I transitioned into, the celebrity assistant world. And from there, I will talk about my big job with Liza Minnelli, which I worked for 9 years. So, but that's basically how I got into the world. Totally random by accident.
Well, sometimes life is like that.
Cool. Yes. No, there are no accidents, right?
Right, exactly. So how long did you work for her?
For Polly?
Yeah.
I don't even, maybe it was 2 years. She ended up, they were going back to Los Angeles. Her kids' show sort of really blossomed. And at the time, I was in my 20s, and I really didn't want to leave New York. My family was here. A good family friend said, my neighbor is very close with Liza Minnelli. Now, I'm going to say something and you might gasp, and if anybody hears this, they're going to say, what? And I said, Liza Minnelli? Who's Liza Minnelli? Right? So I'm
oh my God.
20-year-old, something not really even. They said, okay, let me put it to you this way. Do you know Judy Garland? Yeah, of course. Dorothy was about her daughter. So I'm Googling, and I see her, and obviously I've seen her before, but I just, and the first thing that came up was, I don't know if everybody remembers when she married David Guest, which was such a weird, situation in itself, and we won't go there. But so I said, oh, I know who that is. So she said, well, I think you guys would really hit it off. And she's looking for a dresser slash assistant. So again, question, what does a dresser do, right?
Right.
And she said, well, she goes on tour and she needs somebody that's going to dress her in the dressing room, basically. So they're going to be a hands-on person, you know, at her beck and call, whatever she needs while she's on stage, while she's, you know, on set, whatever. So I said, okay, let's check it out. And they said, you know what? She's not here right now, but we're going to fly you to Toronto and you're going to meet her. And she has a show the following day. So they gave me like a tutorial of what to do. And I'll never forget this. It was at like this casino in Toronto, and I'm so nervous, right? Because I'm like, wow, Liza Minnelli, like after reading about her, I'm like, this is Hollywood royalty, right? So
Right.
I better get my shit together. I better know what I'm doing, you know? So like study all these papers that they gave me, and a limo pulls up and she gets out with 2 bags and she goes, darling, I'm so glad to see you. She hands me the bags and we were fast friends ever since then. And I really think, you know, being an assistant, I mean, there's no schooling. It's really about personalities and your personality clicking with the person that you're working for. And I happen to, you know, be a friendly person. So it's pretty easy for me to get along, you know, with people.
Well, and I also think that you would have to be adaptable.
Correct. You do.
To work with somebody.
I like to think of myself as a chameleon. You know, I just adapt to any situation that I'm in. And even if you don't know what you're doing, you make believe you do. And you'll figure it out along the way. And that's really been my secret all like for the last 20 years. I'm like, just tell me what I need to do. And I don't care if I don't know how to do it. I'm going to figure it out by the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So let me go back and just go transitioning. So you were working for Polly Draper for 2 years. What did you do for her?
So I basically, at the time, she wasn't on any shows, but her kids had a show. So I was helping out with the kids. They were getting, I wasn't on set with them. I was more in the home life, transitioning them. You know, they had to go to school, you know, their home activities, helping to keep the family calendar and schedule rolling because each one of them had something different going on. So I was her New York-based at-home assistant out of her apartment. I wasn't really going on set or doing things like that with her. I was based out of her her household. It was a little bit, but which was great because it was a good introduction to the assistant world. So it was like just her right-hand person. You need a hair appointment, I'm making you a hair appointment. You need me to return clothes, I'm going to Theory to return the pants that you bought. You know, just more of like a home assistant as opposed to a set assistant.
So you have set hours that you have to work, like I got to get there at 7 a.m. And then how close was she to where you lived?
So I lived in, at the time, actually, we both lived down in the Village. So it was walking distance. So it was super easy. Set hours, that's interesting. So I guess according to whoever you're working for and what they're doing, everybody has their own different schedule, right? So for Polly, for example, I wouldn't go in till later in the afternoon. But when I started working for Liza, it was more like come in at 10 and it depends on what the day is. Or if she had to be on Good Morning America by 8 a.m. in hair and makeup, I'd have to be there at 5. So no 2 days were the same.
Right.
And some days we were traveling. You know, I went on tour with her for many years. So it was never 2 days alike.
Do you think that a personal assistant role is more for somebody in their 20s who doesn't really have a life in a way, like a relationship and all that? Like, because that's, you know, the demanding hours, long hours, I would assume sometimes.
Definitely. I think, yes, I think being in your 20s has a definite upshot to getting, you know, the job done and not having to worry about your own life or children or a relationship. So at the time I was single and it worked for me and I got to travel the world. So who else is going to get to travel the world on someone else's dime? First class, all over, right? So my 20s were definitely all about that. You know, when I got into my 30s and I was still working for is when I met someone, which we can get into for sure. But to answer your question, I definitely think to be a right-hand personal assistant, you really need to have the flexibility in your hours, your schedule, and in your life. You really can't say, oh, I can't do this. I have a friend's birthday party tonight. You know, it's not going to work.
Right.
I missed many of occasions, my best friend's wedding. I missed many things, you know, in my 20s because I was committed to my job.
And do you think it's worth it? I guess it would be a personal choice to people. I mean, you've got the pro of I get to travel the world. I'm
Right.
having experiences I would never have.
Right.
To I'm going to have to miss my friends' stuff and family stuff for that matter.
Yeah. Well, at the time, to be honest with you, I was bummed out a lot about things I had to miss. But, now I'm in my 40s and looking back, and I have a family now, and, I get to do that other side of it. I'm so happy that I got to experience, traveling and just being free. Because once you're locked into a marriage and children, you don't have that opportunity until your kids go off to college, and you still don't have it, right? So looking back, I'm happy that I had that experience, and I wouldn't take it back for the world. But during that time, I did get a little bit like upset about, not being able to have a life.
Yeah, because I know that it depends on the star you're working for.
Right.
Some stars are probably easier to work for than
Right.
other stars. I guess it just depends on who you're working for and the level of what they're needing. Now, do you feel like being a personal assistant, do some people have a couple personal assistants
Yes, I definitely.
because of that?
Yes, for sure. And sometimes they need them, like different assistants do different things, So, for example, after Liza, we can get into the fact I started working with Donna Karan. I worked for her for almost 3 years, and she had a personal assistant, she had an executive assistant, she had chief of staff. So we all had our domain, and what we all did was completely separate, and we crossed over at times. But somebody that's a little bit busier really needs all hands on deck, And for Liza, I was the only assistant, which was good and bad. I got to experience it all. And I think like for those 9 years, that's how I learned so much. Everything was hands on. And like I said, even if I didn't know it, I ended up learning the teleprompter. So when she would be on stage, I would be behind the teleprompter because I knew exactly when she would stop, in her monologue, when she would start to go into it, because I knew everything, inside and out. I knew that her next breath, what she would say. So she trusted me to do that. So I started running her teleprompters. So there were other things that I got into from just starting off as her dresser, and all of the different positions that I held working for her. I think really over the years, it was beneficial for me and in my life now because I was a jack of all trades.
Yeah, I guess working for intense people like Liza Minnelli, Barbara Streisand, and some others, that they really, they are functioning at such a high level. I can't even imagine what their brain's going. Just all the things that they are juggling and handling and being able to do is just amazing. So you probably, your firsthand get to see this.
Right. And you have to firsthand really get to know the person. And I think that that's the most important thing, how to succeed in this job, is you really have to know the person inside out and how they're thinking and what their next step is going to be, because they're looking to you to forward think, for example, I'll give you a funny story. Liza was doing like a benefit with Joel Grey, and they were supposed to sing Money from Cabaret. And it was down in one of the theaters in the theater district. And she said to me, darling, I'm going to wear the outfit I'm wearing right now, take a small makeup bag, and that's it. It's going to be so super quick. And I thought, I know exactly. I've been down this road before. I'm packing a full show bag. We're getting a second change of clothes just in case, whatever. So I remember her looking at me and shaking her head and saying, why are you taking all this stuff? It's one song, honey. We've done this. We could do this in our sleep. Well, we get to where we're going, and her shoes broke. One of her buttons came off. We had to change the clothes up, and she looked at me and she goes, okay, I'll never doubt you again. So, you have to learn them, you have to, and even if they tell you one thing, that something's going to change, just, you have to think to be 2 steps ahead. And I think that comes along with the territory of just learning who you're working for and their quirks. Everybody has their own quirks, right? And things going on. So, yeah, a lot of things like that have happened where I thought, I'm not going to trust what they're saying. I'm going to go with my gut, right? Because I've been there before.
Right.
So.
Well, and especially after so many years of working with somebody, I'm sure you get the knack of that.
Totally.
And you're also having an intimate relationship with this person,
It's so interesting, and not just with Liza, with everybody that I'd worked for, and I worked for a few people, you end up being their confidant, their best friend, their mother, their daughter, their enemy at at points, because you're the closest person to them, and sometimes you're having to tell them the truth about something that they might not want to hear. So you really, I think the relationship really changes over time, and you develop a closeness that you're with this person nonstop, right? So it's a very intimate, relationship.
I'm going to ask this. Is
Okay.
it a two-way intimacy? Do they get to know you as well? Or do you feel like as a personal assistant, you really have to keep your personal? They're not your confidant.
That's a good question, Tam. I mean, I think sometimes the lines get blurred and boundaries get crossed. And, because you're with this person all the time, they're asking you about your life or whatever. And I guess it all depends on who you're working for. But they do get involved in your life. Actually, Liza's my daughter's godmother.
Oh, good.
Right. So we were very much like family. And so there's that. But, there's somebody that I'm currently working for that I've learned after all these years, I really want to keep my private life private and my work life in a separate section, because, it gets a little messy sometimes, and you don't want to bring one thing into another. You really don't.
Right. And yeah, I was just thinking, and I hate to say this, have them hold something over you, with person.
Right. Well, always. And if vice versa. I mean, it could
Yeah,
go both
that's
ways,
true.
and, we're so much into each other's lives that sometimes there are things you don't want to know, but it all comes with the territory. And we do sign NDAs and things like that where, I think you really have to trust. And I think it's really hard for celebrities to trust people into their intimate lives, because I feel like they've all gotten taken advantage of in one way or another by
Right.
people. So you really develop that trust over time. And you're trusted with their deepest, darkest secrets, their home. They're letting you into their home, their friends, their family. And that's really something to be said for assistants that have the longevity, because, it's not easy to find trustworthy people, I think, sometimes.
And do you think that being somebody's assistant over the long haul, like 20 years, 30 years with somebody, can a personal assistant have a life? Can they get married? Or is their marriage to the star?
Right. So I think that's definitely a personal choice. And it's a case by case basis. For me, now that I'm in my 40s, I have a almost 10-year-old. I'm divorced, unfortunately, not or fortunately.
Right.
So I have segued into more of a chief of staff role, executive assistant, that I don't have to be hand-holding all the time, that I do allow myself my personal life. So for me, for instance, I work from home, which I worked from home before it was COVID cool,
Right.
like I feel like we invented the wheel a little bit. And the gentleman that I'm working for he's not a celebrity. He happens to be like on the Forbes list of wealthiest men or whatever. So I transitioned into a different aspect of the assistant role so I can have a life. Because I figured I gave up so much of my 20s and part of my 30s, and I gave it to someone else that I really wanted to enjoy my time as well. But I think that I do know people that have worked for their bosses and celebrities for several years into their 60s and 70s, which will probably be where they, stay for the rest of their lives, and they're happy that way. So I think it's just a matter of preference.
Yeah, I guess you never know who you're marrying. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
And then can you just describe the difference between a personal and an executive assistant?
Sure. So a personal is more, I would say, more hands-on, doing more personal errands, being with them in terms of anything that they want to do for themselves. Executive, I think, is more based in an office environment or even a home office, doing the emails and taking care of like officey stuff, as opposed to being the person that's maybe going to the doctor's appointments with them or making their appointments, things like that.
That makes sense. So it's more business related than personal
Business
stuff.
related and personal. Yeah.
And then you worked, with Liza Minnelli for 9 years, and including her time on Arrested Development. I mean, did you get to go on set?
I did. Yes, it was amazing. It was one of the highlights of being her assistant. That and being on the set of Sex and the City too.
Oh, yeah.
Was so much fun. And because I think most people in this generation think about Liza, if they even think about her in that way, but as a performer and they forget about the acting portion of who she is. And it's such a big part of who she is because she's an amazing actress. And watching her interact with other celebrities and how they adore her and idolize her. I mean, even Meryl Streep had come up to her and said, you're like my role model. When I saw you in whatever movie she was talking about. So it's it's amazing to see how many people look up to her in that part of her craft, because she is such a great actress, singer and dancer. So she's like a triple threat, right? And seeing her on set with like Tony Hale and Portia de Rossi, like it was amazing to see her in that element, because I normally we were on tour all the time and I'd see her on stage and we're in a dress rehearsal or sound check, but to see her acting is just a whole other portion of who she is. And it was just like, I felt so honored to be there.
She was so funny in that role. I mean, she was perfectly cast, I thought. Just did an amazing job.
Do you know that, not to cut you off, do you know that most of that, not most, I can't say most, but a lot of her lines were, she just blurted them out. Like she wasn't even going off of a script half the time, and people would just crack up on set, and she just made the whole thing funny. And that's just who she is as a person. And sometimes they were like, well, that wasn't in the script, but we're going to keep it, because it just works so well. And I don't know if you guys remember the ostrich scenes here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember it, but that was so much fun. I mean, every day was just like hilarious being with her on that set.
Well, that was just such an amazing written show. I think it should have done better than I think it did, but I thought it was amazing. So working as a personal assistant, like, you have access now to the stars, right? Do you feel like that you can easily meet people, or you have to kind of step back and not address other stars? What's the boundary and the lines?
I definitely know my boundaries. I would never, that's just not who I am, unless they talk to me. And everybody that I've met has always been so gracious. And because I think I'm with Liza, like I said, is Hollywood royalty, right? So being with her, everybody wants to talk to you. Everybody wants to be your friend. And that's another thing that I got into. Like, some celebrities, would take my number because they wanted to get closer to Liza. So those are the things too that, not just celebrities, just people in general that you have to watch out for, because everybody, I'm the gatekeeper. Everybody wants to get to her. So I'm never the type that's going to say, hey, can I take a picture with you or whatever. I know how to, step back, and unless somebody approached me, I'm not that type. I stand back in the, out of the spotlight.
Yeah. So let's talk about boundaries. Is boundaries an option when you're working with stars? Can you have boundaries?
I think the important thing to do is to set boundaries in the beginning, which is always very hard because you really don't know what you're getting into, right? So, for example, the job that I have now, because I've worked for so many people, I've learned how to set my boundaries. It's taken many years for me to do so. But the problem with setting boundaries is when you're working in somebody's home, which I did a lot of, there are no boundaries. You're in their bedroom. You're in this. You're in the bed. Like, you're around, like you're around your family,
right?
So it gets a little bit muddy. Definitely hard to keep boundaries, but I think it's important, to set them in the beginning if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you probably had opportunities to meet other personal assistants, the celebrity group of assistants. Do you become friends with the assistants, or how does that work?
We do, actually. One of my dearest and closest friends who and that's how we met, Monique, was Barbara Streisand's assistant. And we met when Barbara was on tour, and we are the greatest. I was in her wedding, so I think it's because, we all know what each other is going through, right? So especially Barbara, Liza, right? Who gets bigger than that? So we can commiserate, for lack of a better word, but or share stories, or just know, I got you, I know what you're going through, or bounce ideas off of each other, And I think also being a part of the celebrity assistant group, we have meetups. They do like trade shows or things like that, or get-togethers, cocktails, just so we can be in the same realm of people, because it's hard, sometimes it's just you and the celebrity, you know what I mean? So you don't feel like you have anybody that's on your level. So yeah, you get to meet other people and you get to really bond with them.
Yeah.
which is great.
I just saw, like, if we had a movie on assistants, and I think I shared that with you too, is that everybody's on their phone, so they're trying to talk, but I gotta go.
I know, I apologize to everybody all the time, and not so much anymore because I actually have an assistant now, my own assistant.
Great.
Oh, yeah. So I'm an assistant that has an assistant. I've stepped up in the world, right? I apologize ahead of time if I'm like out to dinner with friends. I'm like, guys, you know the deal. And I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. Everybody knows me by now. That's, I think, what makes me good at my job is that I'm so dedicated. I'm a 24/7 person. So if you're stuck in the airport at 4 a.m., I'm going to be helping you get a flight out, So I'm always on my phone. It's just who I am. Yeah.
Well, so tell me, what's the craziest time you've had as an assistant?
The craziest time I've had is, oh my God, there's so many. I'm trying to think. Oh, actually, this is a pretty funny one. I was working for Donna Karan, and Donna was doing all of the costumes for Barbara Streisand's tour. And one of her outfits didn't fit right, and she had a sound check the next day in LA. And we took everybody in Donna's warehouse and whipped together new outfits overnight. I got on a plane carrying Barbara's clothes, and they were like, "Oh, can we check these?" I said, "No, you can't. These need to all be on the plane." And they were obviously fighting with me a little bit. I said, "No, these are Barbara Streisand's clothes for her tour." Well, all the gay stewards, all of them were like, "Oh my God." They literally were hanging the clothes wherever they could keep them safe in the plane. Everybody was dying. They're like, you're kidding. They thought I was lying. I said, "Nope." I unzipped them, like, "She'll be wearing this." And so that was pretty crazy because I couldn't, I had to get on a plane, literally that second, and get all the clothes ready and have the driver drive me out to Malibu. And I went through a whole fitting with her from 3 a.m. until the whole morning, until she had to get on stage. And it was pretty wild because, Barbara probably is the biggest and greatest star, right? And everybody knows that. And just knowing that I had all of these clothes that she needed and she had to wear, and I had to beg everybody on the plane to I need all of the space for her clothes. It was just crazy. It was just wild. You had to be there. But they were very happy to accommodate.
Yeah, and I was thinking, if you're working with the stars, what clout you have, because you have to make reservations for them, so you're probably saying...
Always name dropping.
Right.
Always name dropping, right? So it becomes a little annoying, and I'm like, I don't really want to name drop, but...
Yeah.
And it's true. I'm like, I need Nobu Malibu. I need to get a table for things like that. And, once they hear who it is, it's very... They're happy to, to help out. But yeah, always name dropping.
Yeah. Now, you probably have a lot of perks. Like you said, first class travel, traveling the world. I was just curious, does an assistant make a lot of money? Or is it all the perks they get that make it worth, what do you know? Could you just give an example of the starting range that a person could make up to?
So, I definitely, over the years, I'm definitely at a point where I'm like, wow, I'm making great money. In the beginning, starting out, I started part-time making, I think it was $35 an hour. I ended up going to 75,000 up to 200,000. So, there's a wide range, and obviously it's all according to who you work for. But like I said, the more you learn. So if you're part-time assistant, if you're dresser, if you're doing the teleprompter, the more money you're going to make, right? Because you're more, it's hard to replace you if you're doing all these things, right? So I've definitely climbed the ladder a bit, so to speak. So I think it's just a matter of what you do, who you work for, and how good you are.
Right.
I feel like we're definitely at the top of my game at this point, but starting out, I think it was just a regular salary, and it was definitely better than teaching. So I was going to take it no matter what, right?
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of fun too. You get to travel, you get to really know somebody intimately. I think that I like that.
It's long hours. So
yeah.
I have to say, being on set, those Arrested Development days, Sex and the City, those are 14, 16, 17 hours a day. You're tired. You're really tired. And I remember actually when we wrapped Sex and the City 2, we were driven straight to the airport to go on a 1-month tour in Australia. So, you really don't have time to sleep, to do much, because you're just transitioning to the next thing. it's fun.
Well, so what do you do all day on set? I mean, when she's acting, what do you have to do?
You have to be right there. You have to be, does she want her Gatorade? Are her feet hurting her? Should we change your shoes? Your makeup, let's get the hair and makeup people in. Something doesn't look right. Are you hungry? So you're really a caretaker too. I think that's a big role. And I think that for somebody that wants to get into the assistant field, you can't be selfish, right? You have to always think for the other person first, and you're really taking care of them. Like I said, you're one step ahead of them. You look hungry, or here, have some water. You've been sitting here all day, just things like that. So you're never just sitting there on your phone bored. I mean, maybe people are, or I'm cleaning up her dressing room, steaming her clothes, whatever it is that she needs. And just basically there, putting the straw in her juice so this way she doesn't get lipstick on the, just things like that. Yeah. Not brain surgery, but definitely just have to be hands-on.
Well, and you have to be a light sleeper too, because you got to be aware of your phone all the time. Does that make restless nights because you're worrying, is she going to call me or not? Am I going to sleep through it?
I don't even know anymore. I'm so used to it that my phone is like attached to my ear. I'm not even sure that if I've ever had a good night's sleep. What's true? And then I became a mother, so really I never slept.
Right.
But yeah, you have to be, you're on call, so you're always, that's a very rare occasion that they're calling you in the middle of the night, and I know I can't really count on two hands if I've ever had middle of the night calls, maybe just like a few times that somebody was stranded in an airport or things like that. But yeah, I've been lucky in that way.
Oh, that's great. So how does one go about getting this type of a job? What qualifications would they need to have today?
If you're working as an executive assistant, obviously there's this clerical, there's, being tech savvy. That's really important. Tech savvy because all the celebrities now are on Instagram. You have to be able to post unless they have like a publicist doing that or whatever. There's really no criteria per se. You definitely have to have a thick skin, because you're working at a fast pace and people are snappy. People are, they're edgy. They're not sleeping because they're on set all day. You have to really be able to deal with different types of personalities. You have to be a people person. You have to be humble. You can't be too good to do anything. I don't know, sometimes somebody's vomiting on the floor and you're cleaning it up. It's the glitter, the glamour, the gutter is what Liza used to say. When we would like walk to stage and she'd have to cut through the kitchen because they didn't want anybody to see her. And she'd turn around to me and go, honey, the glitter, the glamour, the motherfucking gutter. And here we go right through the kitchen. It's things like that. It's not all glamorous. Sometimes it's, so you just have to be open to anything and everything.
Yeah. But what an exciting world. Anything else you'd like to leave the listeners with?
I definitely think I don't regret being an assistant at all. And if you have the opportunity, like I said, I've had so many wonderful experiences. I've met great people, and celebrities, just so you know, are just as human as we are, and they're just doing their craft and they're making people, they're entertaining people. But I love my job. I love what I've done. I love the experiences I've had. And if you have that opportunity, if you meet somebody, you should definitely take it.
Right.
Because it's really gotten me to a great place in my life.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for everything. I'm happy to be here. And I have my little doggy here too. Allie, say hi.
Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram @TammyMcGarrow. Until we meet again, what's your story?